What is Texas getting in Johnny Nansen? And welcome. Happy New Year.
Thank you. You guys got to love college football coaching carousels, huh?
Yeah. I mean, you never know.
Nansen, I like Nansen. You know, the biggest thing was when he came to Arizona, the defense was one of the worst in the country. And the biggest thing, you know, he was bad the first season that he was there. Well, I shouldn't say he was bad. The defense was awful. And they basically made the decision to bring in personnel and said, look, we're only going to be as good as our personnel. To the point where I'll remember when Arizona's defense was looking better early in the season, I went up to Johnny before practice and I joked. I said, oh, yeah, so I guess you're a good coordinator now. And he goes, no. He goes, all about the talent. He's like, it's just they brought in personnel and he did a really, really good job with them this season.
Yeah, Jason, you know, Johnny Nansen, he's been around the block at Washington, USC, and obviously he just keeps on moving up. You talk about just his personality a little bit, just you interviewing him, talking to him. Is he a player's coach? Like, you know, what kind of cloth does he cut from?
Yeah, players like him. He's not, you know, there's some personalities on the Arizona staff. Brendan Carroll, the offensive coordinator, is a big personality. Johnny's not that type of guy. He'll joke around, but he's very businesslike in his approach. And even in press conferences, he doesn't like to give, you know, majorly detailed answers. It's just kind of straight to the point. And, you know, if it was up to him, there probably wouldn't be any press conferences because he'd rather just concentrate on the football side of things. But, you know, getting to know him a little bit over the past year, he's a really good guy. He's very personable when you go up to him. But he's not going to be like this outgoing personality that's all over Twitter and all that. It's not really his style.
Yeah, it's interesting. Johnny Nansen was with Pete Kwiatkowski at Montana State back in 2000 is where they crossed paths. And so it's not just a reunion for Nansen with Sark, who, of course, he was with Sark for all the years at Washington and at USC. In fact, Johnny Nansen was retained at USC when Sark was fired. So there's a familiarity in this situation, Jason. And, you know, when you look at that, does that make sense? Because obviously he was calling the shots at Arizona, right?
Yeah, I mean, he had full autonomy over the entire defense. And I think Arizona fans for sure, but part of Jed Fish probably didn't think that Johnny would go to Texas because Jed barely got involved in the defense. I mean, this was Johnny's defense. And so it's a little bit of a surprise to them, I think. But he is, you know, Johnny's best friends with Sark. That relationship goes back years. They're very, very close. And I think, you know, no one will mention it, but I think part of it is we know that Sark's probably going to be at Texas for a while. And Jed Fish is going to be the hot name until he leaves Arizona. And I think a part of it is, you know, maybe Johnny said, look, if Jed's only here one more year, I'm looking for a job as opposed to going to Texas where I know I can be and have, you know, a little more stability. It wouldn't surprise me if that played a role. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think it just came down to his relationship with Sark and how close they are.
Yeah. Jason, talk about Nansen being the poly whisperer, because that's what I've heard around just his communication with these Polynesian kids that they recruit and stuff, which Texas already has one in Leonga Lafau. But yeah, I always just love those type of guys watching USC, Oregon, all those West Coast teams over the years. Talk about that a little bit.
It sounds like I'm joking, but I'm really not. Texas is about to offer a ton of Polynesian players. Like, Nansen will I don't want to say he'll only offer Polynesian players, but it feels that way at times. I mean, he just has a connection in the community. And when they brought him on board, Arizona also brought Jason Kafusi on board. And they basically said, look, you two are going to help us bring the Poly connection back to Arizona. Because years ago, it was a very big deal. And they did. I mean, there's a ton of Polynesians on the team right now. You know, Jed Fish credited that with changing the culture of the program. Like, the team is really, really close. They stick together. And that's something that Nansen is going to come in and really emphasize. And, you know, I would be shocked if Texas didn't land numerous Polynesian players that are pretty highly rated in next year's class.
Well, Jacob Manu, I don't know if I pronounced that right, but
He did.
he, sophomore, led the Pac-12 in tackles per game, sophomore linebacker. Was this a guy that Johnny helped bring in?
Yeah, so the way it worked was Noah Fafita and T-Mac and Jacob Manu were all on the same high school team. So basically they went to go recruit Noah and T-Mac and Torma McMillan, and they basically said, look at our best friend, this linebacker also. And so Jed Fish wound up bringing them all in. I think Nansen played more of a part in the development, and he has a philosophy, and it might be an Arizona philosophy that may not carry over to Texas. I don't know, but basically Arizona last year or 2 years ago said, we're going to play young players, and they're going to learn, and there's going to be struggles, but they're going to be ready. And so Jacob Manu was on scout team the first 3 games of the year, and finally they started him against North Dakota State, and from there on he started every single game. And that's just what, Arizona's defense is young, and part of it was Johnny said, look, they're going to learn the hard way because we know the following year they're going to be better for it, and they were.
Jason, how was this year knowing that the Pac-12 is just completely done? And then what's the vibe going into the Big 12 for Arizona?
Yeah, it was weird because and I think it really hit when Arizona played USC and UCLA and the LA schools, because it's okay, you're probably never going to play them again, or if you do, it's not going to be for a while. And that's something that it kind of got a weird feeling. But the Big 12 is met with excitement. Arizona at the end of the day is a basketball town, and so football gets a lot of attention here, but basketball, Big 12, I mean, that's just a whole different animal. And so I think Arizona fans are pumped. And with football, you look at it, and the reality is if you wanted to win the Pac-12, you had to go through Washington and Oregon and USC sometimes. And the Big 12, I don't want to say it's easier, but now that Texas and Oklahoma are leaving, it's easier. So I think Arizona fans are excited about that opportunity.
My man Nick Foles, Rob Gronkowski, they don't have they got any signage up of those guys?
Oh yeah. Anytime Jed Fish can mention any alumni that has ever done well, he does it. That's his thing. He'll mention NFL and former Arizona Wildcats that do well. So they're going to get that out as much as possible.
Yeah. Nick Foles, Austin Westlake, baby. I think he left as the Pac-12's career completion percentage leader.
Yeah, and one of the best dudes that I've ever covered. I mean, just such a good guy. It's unreal.
Yeah, I agree, Jason. Yeah. So Jed Fish, I mean, this guy is the rocket ship right now. What does Arizona have coming back?
They returned 17 of 22 starters. So, they lose some good ones. They lose Jordan Morgan on the offensive line. He's going to be a first-round pick. And they lose some talented guys, but they brought in a class that filled needs. They're gonna look at the transfer portal to fill some needs. They're gonna be good. I mean, they return most of their good players, the quarterbacks, the wide, T-Mac returns at wide receiver. They return pretty much the whole defense. There's no reason why they shouldn't be one of the better teams in the country next year.
I didn't look this up, Jason, but was Johnny Nansen a big blitz guy or not so much?
Not so much. The one thing I will say about Johnny is he had multiple plans. So there were games where they would come out and blitz, and there were games where they would drop back and rush 3 and play a dollar package and basically have 6 DBs on the field and try to confuse. And that's what they did against Oklahoma. They said, look, Jackson Arnold is making his first career start. We're going to try to confuse him. And they forced 6 turnovers. There were times at the end of the game where they were rushing 3 and he was holding onto the ball for so long because no one was open. So there's multiple game plans, and that's something that I respected him a lot for. Is Arizona had Don Brown before Johnny Nansen. He's the head coach at UMass now. Don Brown pretty much ran the same defensive fronts and formations every single game. You knew what you were going to get. With Johnny, that wasn't the case.
Talk about Washington this year. Obviously, getting to the national championship game and coming up short to Michigan. Did you expect that when you saw Arizona, who played Washington pretty well this season? I mean, a lot of teams did. Washington had a lot of wins that were, under 10 points, but we saw Washington live in the Sugar Bowl, and you saw Washington live. Did you expect them to be that good this year, and were they that good in your eyes when you saw them live?
Yeah, I didn't expect them to make the title game. I mean, I thought they were pretty good when I saw them. Arizona, that was one of those Johnny games where they basically said, look, Washington's deep offense, they're going to get a bunch of yards, but we're going to try not to let them score. And it worked for most of the game. I think that was the first start for Noah Fafita. So, if that game's played later in the season, maybe it's a different result. But that offense was always really good. I thought the one thing that was going to cost them was their rush defense. It wasn't good at any point in the season, and it really showed up in the title game. That was probably their biggest weakness, and Michigan just kept attacking that.
Yeah. Wow. That's a fascinating story about Fafita, and then Fafita saying, hey, check out my man, Jacob Manu.
Yeah, and what's funny is that team had Manu, Fafita, McMillan, and then Mason Graham, the kid from Michigan. So high school team was pretty damn good.
Wow. What high school was it?
Servite in Anaheim, and they're not as good now. So their coach left, and so they basically. Oh, and Kean Burnett too, who's going to be the starting tight end on Arizona, was also on that high school team.
Yeah, we were just talking about Mason Graham. That dude is a monster. Only a sophomore.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jason, man, we appreciate you you taking some time and letting everybody know what a little bit more about Johnny Nansen. And now I guess Johnny Nansen's going to help Sark find a defensive line coach.
He's very close to Jason Kafusi, who's Arizona's defensive line coach. I don't know if he's a big enough name for Texas, but don't be surprised if that name comes up because they are very close, and another Polynesian guy.
Interesting.